Hello, my name is Abhay Sankar, and I'm a junior from Bothell, Washington. From my research, I learned that Washington's forest lands are being impacted significantly by population growth. With that being said, I want to know how the respective committees are planning to balance the need for increased housing while ensuring sustainable forest conservation and wildlife prevention efforts. Thank you.
Well, Abhay, that pretty much sums up Washington Forest Protection Association, Department of Natural Resources, all of the groups that are involved in the timber industry. We were blessed with a tremendous resource in the Pacific Northwest, and it's our evergreen conifer forests. And specifically, Pseudotsuga menzii, the Douglas fir, which is really not a fir. Balance. So, growth management addresses balance by requiring cities to infill. In other words, before they can expand the urban growth area, they have to attain a certain level of infilling within those boundaries before they can expand them. This is problematic. It's problematic in a number of ways, including how property is zoned, whether it's retail, industrial, residential, commercial. We need to take a look at all of those. We don't want urban sprawl, and we've had a lot of that. And urban sprawl, I mean, you specifically asked about timberlands, but it impacts agricultural lands, resource lands, and timberlands. And growth management was about retaining those. So we don't want to see our forests disappear, but they tell us we need 1 million homes. I think that that's on the high side, just looking at demographics and everything else. So specifically, what I have been most involved in is preserving the economics of timberlands. Certainly we need parks, but the majority of our timberlands are National Forest Service, state, or privately owned lands whose purpose is to produce timber to build those homes. So they are a farm that is just raising timber. And though unsightly at a thinning or a clear cut, they grow back. And this is the purpose for that. We need to preserve our forest lands. But one of the number one reasons that we see forest timberland leave that use and move toward urban development is because of rules and regulations having to do with timber practices and applications and the like. So it's a balance. We have to ensure that we've got a thriving and healthy timber industry in order to preserve that timberland because it has to have an economic benefit. We can only afford so much parkland because parkland costs the government money to maintain. And then we have to infill our urban areas and decide, do we have too much retail or industrial lands that we could utilize for residential? We've changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years with our online purchases and everything else. So do we need as much retail space? Do we need the malls and that? Or could we turn that into housing? These are questions we have to ask ourselves as legislators moving forward to decide where the balance lies. But you ask the question that we have to deal with all the time, and it is, how do we balance our natural resources with what we need as a society? So thank you.
You know, this is another great question, and I really appreciate it. I represent an area that is the northwest tip of Washington State, and we have national forests, we have national parks, we have state forests, we have working forests, private forest landowners. And there are two aspects to our working forests and our forest landscape that I think are important. Number one, where the forests on the west coast of Washington and down into Oregon and Northern California, they are a giant carbon sink. They are sequestering more carbon as they grow than we are producing on the west coast. And so for folks who live out in my area, they're very grateful to live in an area where they're carbon positive. We're sequestering that carbon. When you have a working forest, if you focus in on just that, so when those trees are cut off the working forest, they go into a local mill, hopefully, and those mills are going to, they're going to make 2x4s and 2x6s and 4x8s. The lumber that we need for affordable housing projects, and the more lumber locally that we can source and mill, That also helps keep the carbon footprint lower because your trucking costs are going to be lower. And a lot of our trees are not only milled here in Washington State, then they're sold into hardware stores and sold into lumber packages right here in Washington State. Certainly, a lot of our lumber goes elsewhere, but it's a sustainability model where we can grow trees, create the product to keep our housing supply going, and hopefully keep the raw costs down. I think finally too that a working forest, people may have an image of a working forest like it's somehow off limits. A lot of our private timber companies those forests have trails, and they have game trails, and some of them are open up for recreational opportunities year round. Some of them are opened up for hunting and fishing opportunities. And so a working forest may be working for 40 to 60 years, but at the end of the day, it's working in a way that also allows a lot of public access, a lot of public benefit, and they purify our water. They store carbon out of our air. They provide wildlife habitat. And then when the forest is managed and the crop is harvested, we quickly replant. And so you can have this rotation of land use that's pretty stable. Growing forest land is a pretty stable land use, and it isn't putting pavement on the ground. It is keeping our waterways pure. We've opened up more fish habitat on commercial and private forest lands, and so it's a really sustainable model, and I think something that is part of the heritage of Washington State, certainly part of the culture and heritage of where I live, and then working with our native friends and the importance of sustainable timber harvest to them and how it fits with their culture. So we have a really good model, and a number of our local Native American tribes run commercial forestry operations, and we just have a great sustainable model. If we hadn't got it right when you visited the North Olympic Peninsula, if we hadn't gotten it right over the years, you wouldn't see any trees, but you see lots of trees and lots of areas we've preserved, protected, and made sure that will be there for the next generation. And that's something, a work that I've been involved in my whole public service career, and I'm very proud of that work. So again, great question. Thank you.